welcome back to Pedder Unplugged for episode number 8. I'm Tabitha Badger, and today I'm joined by Professor Geoff Mosley. Geoff is a highly respected academic who's played major roles in all 3 of the federal inquiries investigating the restoration of Lake Pedder. Geoff tells some pretty epic tales about how he accidentally found out the government and HECs plan to flood Pedder 2 years before it was made public. He tells of flying over a flooding Lake Pedder with Prince Phillip of all people, and talks us through the academic history of the campaign. Geoff's a personal hero, and he's an extraordinary protector of wilderness and the wild values which characterise Tasmania. During research for my own thesis on the tourism and recreational value and management potentially at a restored Lake Pedder, I spent many hours going through Geoff's work, so it was an absolute honour to be able to interview him and have this chat. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. This is episode 8 of Pedder Unplugged with Professor Geoff Mosley.
When I first arrived at Lake Pedder 60 years ago, yes. And then, of course, 10 years later, the whole thing was the whole of Pedder was being attacked and the drowning started. So that's 50 years ago. This year, the drowning of Lake Pedder, the original Lake Pedder, started. So those are 2 significant dates, one for me and the other for, I think, should be for everyone. 50 years on, we should be celebrating that anniversary, that terrible anniversary. The word anniversary isn't suitable, that terrible time, and doing something about it. We've had 50 years to do something about it. Now's the time.
I like to say it's that 50 year, it's a commemoration of what was, but a celebration of what will be, because inevitably in 50 years' time, we will have Lake Pedder back, but we'd rather it sooner than 50 years' time.
Yes, the 50 years have gone. It's been drowned for 50 years. So long overdue. Restoration is long overdue, particularly since the area is a World Heritage Area. That is the Pedder area, the old Pedder National Park. Well, the whole of the Huon-Serpentine impoundment is a part of the World Heritage Area, Tasmanian Wilderness World Heritage Area. So it's a unique area in terms of its physical situation, and it's unique scenically too, of course.
60 years ago, you first went to Lake Pedder. You, I assume, would have walked in?
Yes, we walked in from Port Davey, and the idea was that after staying there for a few days, a plane would pick us up. And what actually happened was that the plane hadn't come for 3 days. So, and they said that there was bad weather. Well, we didn't have any bad weather at Lake Pedder. And so we set off to walk the Port Davey track back to Medina, and we'd only gone a few kilometres or so when a plane came overhead, and it was able to take part of our group back to Hobart, and the other half got picked up the following day. So that's actually what happened. But there are many questions about visitation and so on, recreation in the area, will have to be answered when the restoration, so that it can be a true part of the World Heritage Area, occurs.
What was visitation like when you made those first few trips? Was it busy, primarily bushwalkers, or were people flying in and out more than they were walking?
No, in March 62, there were very few other. There were no other people there when we were there, even though it was still summer, officially, I suppose. When we were there in 67, that's when we accidentally learnt about the plan to drown Lake Pedder in the Huon-Serpentine impoundment. That was quite accidental in a way. We just happened to be spending the night in our tents next to an HEC cabin, and the man invited us to stay the night with them, and then in the morning he showed us the map that showed us how the Lake Pedder would be drowned under the Huon Serpentine impoundment. So we then, of course, passed that message on, and of course it was announced 2 years later that Pedder would be drowned. And then, of course, we've had 3 parliamentary inquiries into the question of restoring Lake Pedder, and unfortunately, nothing good has come out of either of them, any of them.
When you first heard the news that Pedder would be, I think, as the government put it, modified, and you relayed that to other people, did they believe you? Because Pedder was declared a national park, so to destroy something that people assumed was protected in perpetuity, how did the community respond to that?
Yes, it was included in the Southwest National Park in December 1967. So it was, of course, still the Lake Pedder National Park in that date I mentioned, which when we were there, of August 1965, we passed that information on, of course, and some of the HEC people or people in Canberra who were providing money for this development were not happy about it, that we had 2 years before the official announcement were spreading the news that there was a plan to drown Lake Pedder. Yes. So there was no immediate campaign at that stage that I can recall. It didn't really happen until 67, when the plan to drown the lake was announced.
Were you part of that campaign? What role did you play initially prior to the flooding?
Well, I was involved in some of those meetings in Hobart, some of them organised by one of the HEC people. His name just escapes me at the moment. Thinking about Allegus Stracanus and those meetings, and I took part in some of those meetings. But that's, of course, when it really got going, the whole thing really got going. I flew over the lake with Prince Phillip and the head of the HEC. We made a trip over the lake in early 1973. I think that would have been about March 1973. And we flew over Lake Pedder. Prince Phillip asked the head of the HEC, "Why on earth do you need all this power?" And I can't remember the reply, other than they said something along the line, "Well, we need it for industry," something along those lines. And then, of course, we flew on over the Lower Gordon area, where the plan for the next hydroelectric dam was. Then we flew down to Port Davey, and then over Precipitous Bluff, and I explained the plan to have a big limestone quarry at near Precipitous Bluff. So obviously, Prince Phillip was not amused by all of these bits of information. So yes, so obviously the campaign was well and truly underway, but you've got to remember that the Tasmanian government had the support of the federal government. One thing that I tried to organise, but it didn't succeed, was I took the head of two union movements to meet Bob Hawke, who was the head of the ACTU, and they strongly advocated this is in early 1973, strongly advocated that the drowning of the lake end and that the original Lake Pedder be restored. Bob Hawke took the matter to a meeting of the executive committee of the ACTU, and they said, well, it's up to the Tasmanian union movement, and you've got to go, it's up to the Tasmanian Trades and Labour Council. And Lee Holloway and myself went to see Brian Harradine, the head of the Tasmanian Trades and Labour Council. We met him near New Norfolk, which is where he lived, and he absolutely flatly refused the request that was coming from the ACTU Executive Committee. So there was a chance there, and of course there was a chance with all these different parliamentary inquiries, I should say. And the last one that I was involved with was a federal inquiry, and at the last minute, the inquiry was stacked by some pro-dam people. In other words, they brought on a couple of extra members onto the committee who they knew would be very definitely against this dam. So there's obviously been a lot of activity, but we need to now get on with the job, realizing that if this area is restored because of its unique significance, its scenic splendor, this will be important not only for that area, but it will be a good symbol for environmental restoration across the whole globe.
Absolutely, it will be. It's going to be the starting point that fundamentally shifts the whole of society's attitudes towards the natural world. Absolutely, it will be.
Yes.
So many people talk about the emotive, almost spiritual side of visiting Lake Pedder. Did you feel that when you were there? You've obviously seen an awful lot of Tasmania, and it's so full of these rich and special places. But what was it about Pedder that made it so unique compared to anywhere else?
Well, what was unique was partly the result of research and finding out. I wasn't, of course, the only one to do that. Kevin Kiernan, for instance, was very important in researching the global values of World Heritage, particularly from a geomorphological point of view. And then we had other important people researching the fauna and flora, like people like Dr. Ian Bailey and Dr. Sam Lake, and establishing the fact that there were many endemic species there. Some of them found nowhere else on the planet, and of course that added to the value, international value of the lake. And I believe some of those endemic species can be returned. Some of them may already exist. Of course, there are other important things to research, including, for instance, the restoration of the land that's now currently under the Huon Serpentine impoundment. The peat, of course, is still there. The bottom grass vegetation will, I believe, be restorable, but that will need probably quite a bit of effort on the part of volunteers. We've already had similar activity in Britain on peatlands. For instance, where peatlands in the Peak District, where the acid rain has destroyed the vegetation, which is basically very similar to the bottom grass. It's called cotton grass. And volunteer groups have been able to restore the vegetation now that we no longer have that acid rain that we had when we had tremendous pollution coming from the power stations to the west, Manchester and so on, Stockport. That's all been tuned down, as it were. We've known, and so that work is proceeding. It will require volunteers. There's also the question of the area which is around the edge of the impoundment, which has been affected by you could call them wave action, that's cut through the peat, and so we've got sort of a rock-like vegetation there. I mean, there's vegetation on the sort of bare rocks, or there is no vegetation on it, on that zone. That's only about a metre wide, a metre to 2 metres wide. So there'll have to be some restoration too on that area right around the whole impoundment, and that'll be a good indicator of the of what was there.
Yeah.
So there are many things to deal with, and we've got experts on peat restoration in Australia as well as overseas. So I'm pretty sure that we'll be able to utilise that expertise.
As a part of the 94 federal inquiry into restoring Pedder, you wrote 2 pieces on the recreational accessibility to Pedder, and one particularly on the land management, which I've just spent a lot of time poring over for my own thesis, and it still stacks up today, a lot of what you've written. So it's thank you for all the work that you've done, and it's fantastic. You talked about planes before that previously, landed on the beach, and there's so many iconic photos of Pedder, and planes were really a part of that. But in talking to local small aircraft operators here, that sort of thing, they say that now, if they were to restore Pedder, to fly in there is very difficult because safety standards around beach landings have changed so much. And the other thing was that costs for fuel, that flying these days, it's so expensive that unless they can guarantee a certain number of customers will pay a certain premium price, it's just not going to be practical for them. So they didn't want to advocate for that again at all, which was really interesting change in mentality.
Yes, I think that's one of a number of big questions concerning the future of recreation in the restored area. With regard to the condition of the beach, which was exposed every summer and will be exposed again every summer when Pedder is restored to its natural state, investigation so far has shown that there's only a sediment that probably will be blown away and blown into the peatlands. So it'll be possible, I think, for planes to land on the beach again. But that is one of the big questions as to whether that will still be considered desirable from a conservation point of view and from a recreation point of view. Would that spoil the experience of this splendid natural area? The other important questions, are to do with, for instance, providing access via tracks. How will you get track access into the area? But I mean, the main question is based on the importance of restoring a World Heritage site. So everything there should relate to that. If the answer is yes, and I certainly hope it will be, for people who will look back and say that was all a big mistake, drowning it. All these other questions need to be answered in relation to maintaining the World Heritage values of that important area.
If you look at Google Maps, you can still see the Sentinels track that goes up to the top of the coronets there. It's all still,
yes,
having a single entry exit track, even if it's just to a lookout, while you let that area rehabilitate itself as naturally as possible before there's humans visiting the area or even any human intervention into it, and just giving it the best possible chance, because as you say, this is World Heritage and it's completely unique. It's a miracle that it's even in a condition that's restorable at all.
The things you'll get from this and from bushwalking in the areas, you'll be able to see it again from the Mount Anne, the trek up Mount Anne when you get up there.
You mentioned Prince Phillip before, and I believe after that flight over Pedder, he went to Parliament House to meet Eric Rees, and it's rumoured then that they had a shouting match over the flooding of Pedder and how ridiculous it was. Do you remember anything about that?
Yes, I was there, and I flew down from Melbourne with Prince Phillip, and that was the plane we were going to use to fly over Pedder, the Gordon, Franklin, Port Davion, precipitous bluff. And yes, after this shouting match, as you called it, Prince Phillip had a long discussion with conservationists at the hall, which is next to that place where the shouting match took place. And the shouting match was all people could hear was the shouting. They couldn't see exactly what was going on. Yeah. But next to that is a big hall, and that's where Prince Phillip sat down, and he asked all the conservationists and others who were assembled there, sitting in all these chairs. He asked for their opinion on all these matters. Yes, and of course they gave it quite freely. So there you have it. He was very strongly in favour of maintaining the natural Lake Pedder. But of course, this is I think this is March '73. The drowning had virtually been completed, which is why, looking down on it, Prince Phillip said, why do you want all this power? Why do you need all this power? In the way only Prince Phillip could say it, of course.
How many trips in total did you make to Pedder?
I'm certain about 2 of them.
Yeah.
I remember taking my young family to a point off where the Scots Peak Dam Road comes. It's very close. You've got the Huon River just on the western side, and we crossed the Huon River, climbed up a spur. I showed my family where Lake Pedder, they could still see Lake Pedder from there. But I've taken many parties to Scots Peak Lookout after the drowning and shown them, what happened, the impound, explained the whole thing to them, yeah.
So in the IUCN and ICOMOS 2015 reactive monitoring mission of the World Heritage Area, the Tasmanian Wilderness World Heritage Area, they stated that the dams impounding Lake Pedder were degrading the integrity of the World Heritage Area. It's my understanding in the World Heritage Convention, Tasmania is obligated to restore degraded sites.
Yes, they certainly have made, the IUCN has made, and the World Heritage Commission has criticised the terrible nature of this destruction, or not destruction, but this damage to a wonderful World Heritage Area. They've certainly done that. And they passed a special resolution at a meeting in Buenos Aires in 1984 about the horrible damage that has occurred in the destruction, or not destruction, rather the temporary destruction, I'll call it, of Lake Pedder. Yes, they didn't use that term, but anyway, I've actually got the wording somewhere here. They called it an environmental disaster. That's what it was called. I actually carried out made a conservation outlook report for IUCN. I think it was 2016. But anyway, I went into some detail about the horrible nature of this drowning of this wonderful World Heritage site, yeah, and the need to get on with the action of restoring it as far as possible to its natural state.
As we're speaking, this is the 50th year since Lake Pedder was flooded. How have you maintained your optimism for 50 years that Pedder will one day be restored?
Oh yes, I've certainly have, and that's of course for many years. I think I took my students on 20 trips to the Scots Peak Lookout and told them on the history of the valleys that we were looking at. And also about the prospects for recovery. And of course, you can win how the long-term values of society can succeed, be considered more important over the short-term values of hydroelectric industrialization.
That was episode 8 of Pedder Unplugged with Professor Geoff Mosley. It's a shame podcasts are only audio and not visual, because Geoff wore an epic old guy's rule cap when we recorded that podcast. It was an absolute honour to have Geoff on the show. During the episode, I made a small error when I referred to the 1994 federal inquiry. I'm referring to Geoff's work, which he prepared in 1994 for the 1995 federal inquiry, initiated by Peter Tyler's work from the 1991, when he showed that the beach and dunes were in fact intact under the impoundment waters. Anyway, that whole story is discussed in episode 2 with Hilary Bennell, so if you haven't checked that out already, be sure to do so. As always, if you'd like to learn more about the Lake Pedder campaign, head to lakepedder.org. I'm Tabitha Badger, and thanks again for listening.